Right. If you got your Bibles, turn to Ezekiel, the 33rd chapter, if you will. Ezekiel, the 33rd chapter. I want to entitle my message today, The Watchman. If there's anything that we've needed in America over the last few years, it's preachers that are watchmen. Preachers that are not afraid to speak out against the evil and the wickedness that we see in our country and in our government. In Ezekiel 36, 26 through 27, it says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my commandments. Boy, is that ever needed in our nation today. But we need watchmen to speak out against these things, people that are willing to not be afraid to speak of the judgment that's going to come unless we turn from the wickedness that our country is involved in today. I said earlier, we've got an election coming up this week, and I really believe, I'm 77 years old, and I really believe that this is the most important election that we've ever had in this country. Now, I know every election that comes along, somebody says that, but you better be serious about this one. We've seen the last 4 years, the craziness, the insanity that the globalists and the liberals have tried to bring into our nation. They virtually destroyed us in 4 years. Inflation. Have you been to the grocery store lately? My goodness, I dread going. I don't know how a young family can afford to feed their kids. You can't even get a buggy full of food without spending $200 to $300. And that's all caused by the insanity of the government that we've had for the last 4 years. Now, the question is going to come down to this. Are we crazy enough as a nation to repeat another 4 years of the insanity that we've had to deal with over the last 4 years? Well, preachers need to speak out against these things. But here, in Ezekiel verses 1 through 6, tells what it means to be a watchman. Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of your people, and say to them, when I bring the sword upon the land, and the people of the land take a man from their territory, and make him their watchman, when he sees the sword coming upon the land, when he sees judgment coming upon the land, is essentially what that's saying. See if he blows the trumpet and warns the people. True preachers will warn the people of what sin will do to a nation. The Bible is very specific about it. We've got too many men in our pulpits that are professionals rather than preachers, that are afraid to speak out against the evil and the wickedness. And without preaching, the people will perish, the Bible tells us. It says where there is no vision. If you look at that verse, it actually means where there is no preaching, the people will perish. And we haven't had any preaching in America in a long time. We've had a few preachers that are not afraid to speak out, but very few. Most of them are more concerned about their private jets and their Mercedes-Benz and their huge congregations than they are about warning America of the destruction that's going to come. But if the sword comes and takes him away, the blood shall be on his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet, but did not take warning. His blood shall be upon him, but he who takes warning will save his life. Now, what that verse is essentially saying is God gives warnings to a people. I believe he's been warning America for many years, been warning us to turn back to God, which we haven't done. We haven't done that, just dedicating these beautiful children today. You think about one of the primary things that women are concerned about or whether they can still murder, not all, let me not broad brush that, but what many young women are concerned about is about murdering their children. That's one of the primary issues that we see in this election. So when it comes down to that, we've got some major problems in our nation. Now, in this section, God repeats himself. He means that it's important, and he's repeating again a warning to the nation of Israel. He says, when I bring a sword upon the land. And that means he's going to bring punishment. They've been warned, and they've been warned again about the judgment that comes upon a wicked nation. And there's always a place for, for those to do what Ezekiel was called to do as a watchman, to discern God's judgment that will come if repentance does not take place. And then in verse 3 it says, if he blows the trumpet and warns the people, the watchman of the city would be on the walls of the city, and when he saw problems and issues coming, he would blow the horn. A specific sound of the horn would warn them that destruction was coming. And he's just referring to the trumpets as a man trumpeting the judgment that is coming to a nation. And then in verse 4, then whoever hears the sound of the trumpet and does not take warning, if the sword comes and takes him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. So, if God brings judgment upon our nation, the blood is on our head as a nation. You know, the verse that says the rain falls on the just as well as the unjust, how true that is. If he brings judgment upon this nation, it's going to be upon all of us, Christians included, if he sees fit to tarry as far as coming and taking the church out. But he who takes warning will save his life. So it's important that we understand that God warns a nation before its destruction. Now, there are some things that are going to take place in this coming election that we have to realize will destroy this nation if they come to fruition. What can we do to advance the kingdom of God? We as Christians, true Christians, need to ask that question. What do we need to do to display the glory of God and to stem the tide of the evil that will come upon us if, I'm not going to name the party. You know who the party is. But I'm just going to call them the globalists. The globalists, if they have their way, America will be no more. Remember that God uses flawed people. Now, if you have an excuse not to vote for the orange man because he cusses a little bit and because he has mean tweets and all these other things that they complain about, keep in mind, God uses flawed people. He's used flawed people many times in order to save nations. So we know that Trump is certainly not perfect. Now, what other decisions in your life do you make that must meet 100% criteria for you to make those decisions? No Christian should use a personality in order to deny voting for them if their personalities are bad, if they're not quite as righteous as we think they should be. We need to realize that it's not about personality, it's about the programs that are promoted. What does the leader promote? What does he stand for? And that's where we are as we approach this election. Now, I know I'm just preaching to a few people this morning, but I'm telling you, it needs to be preached. It needs to be preached all over this country. Unfortunately, there's not enough watchmen to do so. But don't look at the person, look at the policies that the individual is putting forth. Now, I'm going to give you the policies that the Democratic Party is putting forward and has put forward, so it's not going to be a surprise for us. They've been doing it for 4 years now, And there's not going to be a change no matter how much lying takes place. But don't look at the person, look at the policies. I'd rather have an orange, angry man that cusses a little bit with the right policies than to have a woman that can't put a sentence together controlling and running our country. You say, well, that's kind of mean-spirited, preacher. Yeah, it is, but do you want an idiot as your president? Because if she gets in, the woman has an IQ that wouldn't reach room temperature. If you listen to her speak, you know that. If you listen to what she has to say, you know the woman is absolutely low IQ. But isn't that really what these globalists want? A low IQ puppet that they can control. They had one, they got rid of him and got one dumber than he is. So that's what they want. They want somebody they can control and they can force to do exactly what they need to do in order to destroy the sovereignty of America and therefore bring in a globalist government. So we don't need to worry about personality. We need to worry about policy. Proverbs 13:34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, and sin is a reproach to any people. I had a preacher friend tell me, I guess he's a friend still, maybe not, but anyway, I had a preacher friend tell me, how can any evangelical Christian vote for Donald Trump, as evil as he is, as wicked as he is? Like I said, you don't look at the personality. God has used evil men before to save nations. But just because he's angry, just because he calls people names sometimes, I call people names sometimes, like the idiot Kamala. But anyway, I'm just being honest because she really is kind of crazy. But just because he's angry, and just because he tells jokes sometimes and says things that, doesn't quite line up with what your political correctness is. But look at the 3 Supreme Court justices that he put in that overturned Roe versus Wade and allowed abortion to be where it needs to be, in the hands of the state, not in the hands of the federal government. But vote policies over personalities. I'm listing 7 biblical policies that are worth considering as you go to vote. How many of you have already voted? Just about everybody. All right, sermon's done. I'm not going to be able to help you at all. But I still want to share with you what I'm talking about, if just one person could change their mind. Isaiah 1:25 says, I will restore your judges as at the first, and your conscience as it was during the beginning. Afterward, you shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Now, God is saying that when you choose the right judges, then you can have the right policies. Now, Donald Trump, in his single term as president, appointed 226 federal judges that were, most of them were constitutional judges. Now, what do I mean by that? Judges that adhere to the Constitution, not the whim of their liberal desires. That's what it means. But when it comes to the 13 federal appeals courts, who have the final word on most legal appeals around the country, Trump appointed 54 constitutional judges. Supreme Court justices, they play a huge role in our government. He appointed 3 constitutional judges. And then the next thing is border security. What do you think about border security? Acts 17:26 says, and God has made from the blood every nation of men to dwell upon all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. So when God divided up the promised land of Israel, He divided it up according to boundaries, not open borders. You cannot be a nation and have open borders. Look at all of the horrible, horrendous things that we're already seeing by the illegals that have crossed over, not to mention there's warnings that much greater destruction is going to take place for many of these people that's crossed over illegally into this country. In Zechariah 7:10 it says, "Do not oppress the widow of the fatherless, the alien, or the poor." And that's the verse that those that want open borders want to use. But yet we can still protect the alien and the widow if they come in legally. If you listen to people that come into this country legally, not coming across the border illegally, they work hard to become citizens, and they assimilate to who we are as a country. These that are coming in illegally will never assimilate to the country, especially the Muslims. The Muslims will never assimilate to how and what we believe in America. The reason they won't is because their allegiance is to Allah and Sharia law. So, as we open these borders, we are essentially letting our country become a non-sovereign country without any protection, and it's going to cost us greatly in the future. Now, you say, well, Kamala said it's stopped now. No, it hasn't. And then the law they tried to pass was going to allow so many million to come over illegally every year after the law was passed. And all they've got to say, well, we tried to get a law, but Trump wouldn't go along with it. So we have all that great. And then a very important thing is Israel. You have no idea how important supporting Israel is for the United States of America. I believe the only reason this nation has not been totally and completely decimated is because of our support for that little nation of Israel. In Genesis 12:3, you're all familiar with this verse. It says, "I will bless those that bless thee," speaking of Israel, "and I'll curse those who curse thee," speaking of Israel. "And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Now, I'm not saying that everything that Israel does is right, but you still better support them. But I know that we need to be an ally with Israel. They are the only ally we've had in the Middle East. How do you describe an administration, or what kind of administration here in America would try to bully the nation of Israel after October the 7th, a little over a year ago, the Hamas came in and virtually slaughtered their citizens? How can you say, well, if you don't do it my way, we're going to withhold military support for you, while on the other hand, giving billions of dollars to the enemies of America and the enemy of Israel, and that, of course, being Iran? How do you explain that? How do you not realize it's going to cost us, and it's going to cost us dearly in the long run? We can't have our politicians cozying up to the enemies of Israel. And many of the Jewish politicians are doing that, because that's exactly what they are, politicians. Chuck Schumer up in New York is a Jew, but he's a Jew-hating Jew. There's many Jews that hate their people, hate their nation. They won't tell you they hate them, but their lifestyles and their support of Hamas and their support of Iran tells you that they hate their very own people. How can that be? But Netanyahu is in a very difficult position. When Benjamin Netanyahu came to address Congress in July 2024, it was a disgrace that Vice President Kamala did not show up. It's a disgrace to our ally, our only ally in the Middle East. Now, the proxies of Iran, we need to put extreme pressure on them. But instead, this administration has done nothing but support them financially enabling them to do exactly what they're doing toward Israel right now. But ask yourself, which candidate will best support the nation of Israel? I think this one's already shown her cards. Religious liberty. That's something that should be important to every believer. Exodus 23, you shall have no other gods before me. There are 613 laws in the Old Testament that are summarized in the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20. Now, the first of the Ten Commandments in Exodus 23 that are written above is called the conscience clause, because it means that if my allegiance is supremely to God, there are to be no other gods to put ahead of him or to worship. That means that I need not bow down or to submit to anything or anyone that conflicts with our God and the truth of our God. We need to ask ourselves in this election, who will best support the conscience clause? Who will best support Christians' religious freedoms in America? Let me say this. Christians can be very foolish sometimes. When we're compared to sheep, we are as dumb as sheep. When I look back at what this government did to churches and did to believers during the so-called crisis of COVID-19, taking away our rights, and we gladly allowed them to do it. I can't explain a lot of things about COVID. I can't explain why some people have reactions from COVID shots and some people don't. I guess it has something to do with DNA. But I have a sister-in-law down in North Carolina right now. They're almost certain that the shot she had has caused the tumors, which has caused the cancer that she's been battling. And how many people have you known? How many young people have suddenly died of heart attacks that have had the shots? You say, well, I had the shot, it didn't bother me. Well, maybe your DNA was a little different. But no government, no democracy should ever have the right to tell anyone, if you do not take this shot, you will not have a job. And many Christians went out and got the shot not to lose their job. It could have been a 666 planted on your forehead. But I understand why people, their livelihoods depended on it. I understand why some people had to do it, especially in the medical field. You were required to either take the shot or you weren't there anymore, period. So I'm not being critical of you. I'm being critical of the government that overstepped its bounds and the freedoms that we are founded upon to force you to get the poke. Now, how do you explain that? I don't know. But you better wake up, because the next time it's coming again, they know how far they can go now. You better be ready to make a stand. You better be ready. So, our religious liberties have been taken away. Now, we have to ask ourselves, who will support the conscience clause? It means that doctors who refuse to do abortions on religious grounds won't be forced to do it. That's a whole different situation that is anti-government. Graphic designers and photographers and cake makers can refuse to bake cakes for the LGBT community without being persecuted or their business shut down or thrown in jail. It means that companies that object to providing abortion drugs as part of the health care program won't be forced to do it. See how many of our freedoms have slipped away and a lot of people don't even realize it? Now, which party do you trust to protect those religious freedoms? There's only one God, and we should bow down to that one God and not the government. And then biological sex or gender. In Genesis 1:27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female. Oh, let me say that again. Male and female, he created them. Male and female. God makes it clear in Genesis 1:27 that in the image of God he created us, male and female. We don't decide what gender that we want to be. But you don't understand the psychological aspect of it. I understand that a man is a man and cannot become a woman, and a woman is a woman and cannot become a man. They can maybe dress like one or something to that effect, but they cannot genetically become the opposite sex. And isn't it sad when we have a Supreme Court justice to be question and ask the question, do you believe men can get pregnant and have babies? And she said, yeah. Booker T. Washington said that a lie doesn't become truth, and wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority. Is that where we're headed in America? The acceptance of this evil? 14 states presently have transgender shield health care laws. What is that? Minnesota? Good old Governor Wall up there, the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, the former great coach of a state championship team that he was only an assistant on, and he doesn't even know what a pick six is. How many of you know what a pick six is? Raise your hand. All right. If you were a football coach, you'd know exactly what it was. But anyway, he put forth some of the most liberal laws, just like the tampons in the boys' bathrooms. That's why they call him the tampon man. How crazy is that? Steve, how crazy is that? Zeke, you haven't had any tampons in your bathroom at school, have you? I mean, this is insanity. You think, well, that's somewhere else. That's not here. Well, hey, go out to Withwidth. You know where Withwidth is, don't you? That unneeded high school that cost $45 billion to build out on those caves out off of 81 out there. Go out there and ask the furries how long they can use their litter boxes every day, because they identify with a cat. Ben, I know you're grinning. You know I'm telling the truth, don't you? If you have anything to do with the public schools around here, you know how far they've slipped. God help us. But Governor Wall signed legislation last year making Minnesota a trans refuge state. The Minnesota law allows courts to have temporary emergency jurisdiction over your child. Governor Wall signed that into law. They are coming after your children. They're coming after the children. Now, these laws of gender confusion led to biological boys competing in girls' sports. How crazy is that? How nuts is that? Well, why haven't the Christian community stood up and done something about it? Well, you voted the wrong people in, or somebody did. So which candidate will best protect God's biological design for gender? Let me ask you that. And then, of course, family. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. And then we get into the wickedness and the evil that exists when it comes to protection of children in the womb. Abortion. Call it anything you want, but it's murder. It's wicked, evil murder. It carries with it the spirit of Molech, the spirit of Baal from the Old Testament. Every time we murder a baby, it's for our so-called financial good. Just like when they burned their babies in the fire to Moloch, it was so their crops would grow. So we have to ask ourselves, how long? In Acts 3:15, God is called the author of life, not death. Proverbs 6:17, God hates hands that shed innocent blood. He hates a nation that sheds innocent blood. So which candidate do you think will protect the unborn child the most? 30 years ago, old Bill Clinton was the one who said that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Now they say abortion should be available up till the day before birth. That's just evil beyond imagination. To clean up their immorality from the promiscuous of their life beforehand. I'm proud of moms, no matter what their lifestyle might be, that get pregnant and have those children, and either adopt those children or straighten their lives out and become good parents and not abort that child, not murder that child in the womb. So, we need a policy that does not advocate celebrating murder of children. And this, I just jotted this down. Why was it allowed outside the doors of the Democrat National Convention for there to be a mobile abortion clinic aborting babies as they were having their convention? How could you vote for a party that supports that? I couldn't. If you can, there's an altar here this morning for salvation. But what will happen if we don't stay engaged as believers, as Christians? There are 90 million evangelicals eligible to vote. Of that 90 million, 40 million do not vote. They sit on their rear end at home and let our country be destroyed. And of the 90 million, 15 million are not registered to vote at all. That's 55 million Christians who say, I'll let evil take over because I'm going to do nothing. If Christians get up and do something, we might be able to stop this wickedness and this evil. So, in closing, in the 1940s, Adolf Hitler gathered all the prominent clergy, the preachers in Germany, at his place in Berlin. And he wanted to assure them that he had their backs. Churches in Germany were state subsidized, and he said that with him in charge, that he would take care of their subsidizers and their churches would not be harmed. One of the men in that room, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, stepped up to confront Hitler. And when he did, the other clergy took a step back. That's most of the clergy in America today. Bonhoeffer said, Herr Hitler, we are not concerned for the church, for Jesus Christ will take care of the church. We are concerned for the soul of Germany. And Hitler said, Herr Bonhoeffer, you need not worry about the soul of Germany. I'll take care of the soul of Germany. Friends, government is not the answer to the soul of a nation. God is the answer. Let's stand. So as I said, as you go out to vote this week, it's one of the most important things that you'll do. Because I really believe that our sovereignty, our nation, will hang in the balance from every which way this election goes. I sure hated to bring that tough message with these babies getting dedicated today. But that ought to make us want to stand up stronger for America as we look at those precious kids. We want a future for them is what we want. Richard, would you close in prayer for us?